Hi, Jack Andrews here. Thanks for playing the replay of this webcast, The State of the States. I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel as well as liking this video. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Thank you and enjoy. Okay, so let's move on to the state of the other states. Now, there's only one way to describe the gold rush that is sports betting legalization in the United States, and that is a fistful of dollars. Clint Eastwood is still going to be our spirit animal here, but we'll jump around his movie filmography a little bit more to prove our points. Let's start with the states that could go ahead and make my day. So there's Dirty Harry, but instead of pointing his .44 Magnum, he's giving us a thumbs up because he approves of how good these states might have it when it comes to sports betting. All right, so let's go down the list here. We have Arizona, and now Arizona is all tribal casinos, but there's a healthy amount of competition. So the right law with some convenience and some growth potential could make for a decent opportunity for sports bettors that live in Arizona. Maine actually had a good law. They had open competition, mobile betting. Any company that ran sports betting in another state could apply for a license to be in Maine and operate in Maine. However, the governor vetoed it, and there was significant lobbying from Penn National, who operates a brick and mortar casino within Maine, and basically they didn't want this level of competition, a level playing field, when they have so much overhead already in the state of Maine. That's somewhat understandable, but at the same time, you have to applaud Maine's efforts for trying to create such a level playing field, because that only benefits the consumer. It could return next legislative session. We'll see what happens in the fall when it comes to Maine. Maryland has a voter referendum coming up this fall. It should pass. Anytime that there's a high turnout into a election, and since it's a presidential election, there will be a higher turnout. These things, like legalizing gambling, tend to do pretty well. So this should pass this fall. Maryland has a lot of reasons to be competitive. They have a lot of sports betting popping up in the states around them. It'd be a good idea for them to put forth a good effort so that they can get some traffic across state lines into their state. Missouri has a long gaming history, and they also have a history of protecting consumers when it came to gaming industry. So they're still sorting out what they want to do with sports betting, but I have a feeling Missouri is going to be a decent state for sports bettors. There's a lot of casinos. There could be a lot of competition. As long as they don't make any large mistake, it should do pretty well. And then Oklahoma is a very good one. Oklahoma is all tribal gaming, and they have a ton of casinos. They get a lot of traffic across state lines from Texas, from like the Dallas area. And it could be very competitive in Oklahoma if they can unite the tribes and come up with a good, solid law for the consumers. Oklahoma could be a great place to practice sports betting. So the next section I'm going to call the Mule. And the reason I call this the Mule is because it's starting to resemble a jackass, but it's not quite there yet. These are states that have bad motives, bad ideas, and likely will have a lousy product. So there are some hallmarks of a state that's probably not going to be good for sports betting. And a state is going to have issues if they have too many different types of stakeholders in their state. In other words, if they have a lottery that wants a piece, if they have established casino companies that want a piece, if they have tribal gaming that wants a piece, all of them very rarely play well together. And meanwhile, if they have one dominant stakeholder that lords over the others, that can't be good either, because they're going to end up with an unlevel playing field. And sometimes that doesn't even need to be a gaming company. Sometimes that can just be an industry that doesn't want competition from the gaming industry. And then there's also special interests that can always throw a wrench into the works. So I'm going to start at the bottom of this list because the top of it's a real doozy. So we're going to go in reverse this time. So Virginia has a sports betting law that is on the governor's desk to sign. It's not horrible, but Virginia has no existing casino infrastructure, and they're looking to please too many special interests with the way their bill has been shaped. Mainly, they want to please the sports leagues and the NCAA. They won't permit wagering on Virginia colleges. They won't permit any prop bets on college games. And they require official league data to be purchased by the operators. And then they're also willing to give sports teams an operator license to operate a sports book if they move into their state. The whole bill seems just a little bit too thirsty. Louisiana has had established casino gaming for a while, but it's been slow on the draw when it comes to sports betting. So the big sticking point that seems to be for Louisiana is New Orleans. So they want to protect the Superdome in New Orleans, mainly in that they want to keep the NFL coming back with more Super Bowls to the Superdome in New Orleans. So they've been very slow to signal any support for sports betting until they figure out exactly what the NFL wants to do with sports betting. They said they won't allow sports betting at the one casino in New Orleans, the Harris property located near the waterfront. So Louisiana could end up with a sports betting law that pretty much favors just the NFL or the sports leagues and harms all the consumers and all the operators that operate in a vast gaming state such as they have. Another state that's considered the Mule is Kentucky. Now, Kentucky has a long, rich history of horse racing, and as a result, they've entrusted the Horse Racing Commission in the state to oversee sports wagering if a law can be passed. Now, this creates the scenario of one dominant stakeholder, which in this case is Churchill Downs, which operates casinos in multiple states. There's a good chance that any move forward in Kentucky is going to be favorable to Churchill Downs and what they want to do in the state of Kentucky. But so far, the bill to legalize sports in Kentucky has been stalled by various amendments and partisan politics. Democratic governor is highly in favor of expanding legalized gambling, so the Republican legislature has started to kind of decide that they don't want it as much as they used to. But if it gets past this stage, expect a contested process forward when it comes to regulation in Kentucky. I think they're going to be a very slow state to move, even if they pass a bill. They're going to be a lot like Tennessee. So then there's California. So long has California been a dazed and confused state when it came to gaming. California keeps making head fakes towards sports betting legalization. However, this is a state that just has too many different stakeholders. Currently, the tribes want sports betting all to themselves. They're pursuing a ballot referendum for November to ask California voters if they should legalize sports betting. Now, of course, a ballot referendum, they're rarely straightforward, and you can expect this one to be worded probably deceptively, as it intends to restrict sports betting for everyone that's not a tribe. The tribes were 2/3 of the way to get to the required 1 million signatures when the pandemic broke out. I guess that's a silver lining to the pandemic, because the tribes only have until April 21st to gather the rest of the signatures required, and to do so now without any kind of social interaction seems pretty dubious. Speaking of dubious, the tribes put out the findings of their own survey, which said that 2/3 of Californians do not want the ability to bet on mobile apps. Sorry, that just sounds wrong and incorrect. I doubt Californians want to drive in hours of traffic to get their wagers down at tribal casinos. But the problem with California gaming is that, as underhanded as the tribes can be, the card rooms are probably worse. While the card room should be included in any sports betting law, I doubt they'll come up with a fair and equitable solution on their own or in agreement with the tribes. So California is likely going to stall and linger in this malaise that they've always been in. The sports betting money in the state will continue to go offshore, or it'll continue to drive through the desert to Las Vegas. So then there's Florida, and the biggest mess in gaming will always be Florida. I could dedicate hours of video to just discussing Florida's issues with their gaming. And in this case, they check all of these boxes. They have too many stakeholders with tribal gaming, legalized racinos, and lottery. They have one dominant stakeholder in the Seminoles who control the path of Florida gaming based on their compact with the state. And then they have special interest in Disney, which doesn't want gambling anywhere near their parks. They don't want a family to be on vacation in the Magic Kingdom and the dad's on his phone betting on sports. So the Seminole tribe has been holding Florida gaming hostage for years. Their compact with the state has been in a state of renegotiation for years, and they use those negotiations to keep moving the goalposts as to what they want to offer in the state. Right now, the Seminoles want exclusive rights to all forms of sports betting. The state is trying to find a compromise that would include the casinos in the southern part of the state and the racinos and dog tracks elsewhere in the state, even the highlight places in the state. However, there's very little hope of a good compromise that can be reached. The Seminoles are just too rich compared to the other operators, and they'll lobby their way into getting what they want. In the end, Florida's probably not going to have a sports betting law, and if they do, it's going to be probably pretty bad. It's probably just going to favor the Seminole tribe, and I don't think there's any hope that Florida can change that anytime soon. So sorry, guys in Florida. Let's move on to quickly to some of these other states, and I call these the Unforgiven. These are states with little or no chance to pass legalized sports betting. Obviously, the prohibition of all forms of gaming is kind of baked into the Constitution in Utah, so there's no chance there. Idaho and Wisconsin have made no moves towards sports betting and have laws in place prohibiting it as well. Alaska and Hawaii have actually had some bills, but there's really no movement towards the product in those two states. And then there's Texas. Texas has a long, complex history with gaming. It would be tough to ever get gaming laws through the state. However, there are a few rich, influential men who have a desire to bring sports betting to Texas. One of them owns America's team in Dallas. He's very interested in sports betting. And the other is a furniture store owner who's been known to make some pretty large wagers on his favorite team, the Houston Astros. So if it happens in Texas, I think it's going to be through private enterprise, overcoming a staunch cultural opposition. But for now, though, I wouldn't hold my breath in this state or any of the other ones on this slide. So what's left here is what I call Heartbreak Ridge. These are the states that could go either way, some for the better, some for the worse. Then there's also a good chance that most of these states eventually get sports betting, but I'm just not sure in what shape or form. It's too early to tell. But let's run down them real quick. There are states with little movement, such as Nebraska and Ohio, that have done little towards legalizing sports betting. There are states that have bills pending, such as Connecticut and Georgia, Kansas, Massachusetts, Minnesota, South Dakota, and Vermont. Out of those, Vermont actually looks like a decent one. They kind of picked up the charge where Maine had left it, saying we want to have an open competition of mobile environment for bettors. It actually look like they'll be very good compared to their neighbor, New Hampshire, in what they're going to be able to offer if they can get that bill through. And then there's a couple states here that just have had bills that have come and gone and have failed. They've yet to reintroduce another one yet. That's Alabama, South Carolina, North Dakota, and Wyoming. So I wanted to rush through that last slide here just because we're running a little short on time and there's not a whole lot known about these states. I couldn't go into too much detail on any of them. But let's talk about what you can do as a constituent in any of these states that I've mentioned. You can get involved. Now, if your state already has legal sports betting, it's going to be a little bit of a slower chance of having it change into anything better. You just have to accept that. But for those of you who are in states that have active bills going, or you have, there's rumors that sports betting's coming, this is a good time to contact your legislators. You can call them, you can write them. It's pretty easy to find out contact information. Make it short, make it sweet, make it simple, but at least get your voice known. And then another thing you can do is that when your state passes a law for sports betting, respond to the request for public comments. We've actually seen this works. We've seen in Illinois, they had 350 pages of comments. I submitted one small 2-paragraph comment on how there shouldn't be one-sided markets allowed in Illinois. You need to have a winner and a loser in every market offered, because otherwise you offer these one-sided markets and they're just bad for the consumer. And what do you know? That became a regulation in Illinois. It surprised me, but it works. We saw it in Tennessee. Enough people complained that their 15% mandated hold was bad, and they've changed that down to 5%. We saw people complain that ties lose on parlays in Tennessee, which was totally weird, but people really railed them on that, and it changed. So the request for public comments does work. Keep up with the news. Keep up with what's going on in the sports betting world. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow some other people that keep up with this sort of thing. And then, of course, there's an organization I'm involved in, and I'll just mention it real quick here. It's the American Bettors Coalition. We're at AmericanBettorsCoalition.org, as well as at American Better on Twitter. And basically what we're looking to do is we're looking to be the eyes, ears, and voice of the American sports bettor, so that we can relay to the sports bettors, here's what's going on in these states. And we can also then relay to the states, here's what the sports bettors want in terms of the sports betting laws. Here's what the consumer wants. Too often we've heard from operators, and we've heard from regulators, and we've heard from companies that aren't even in the U.S. as to the shape of how U.S. sports betting should go. We need to change that. We need to make sure it's the American consumer that gets the voice for American sports betting. So we started this nonprofit organization. It's a little tough right now with this pandemic. We're going to see some funding dry up pretty fast on us that we were kind of hoping for. But there's some good people behind this, and I hope to make it a decent voice for sports bettors going forward.